All right, guys, we are going to get rolling here. Welcome to our first webinar of 2025. Really excited to have you all and super excited to have our guest webinar speaker today. Just wanted to give a quick plug to the Enablement Squad. For those of you who are not already a member of the Enablement Squad is a community of over 4,000 enablers, and its main purpose is really to uplift the peers in this community and get their voices out there. It's about making connections with other enablers, meetups. It's super fun if you're not already a part of the Enablement Squad. We'll definitely drop a link in the chat at some point to join, because we would love to have you. So on to our guest, Jake Peterson. Jake, thank you so much for joining us today. Jake is a U.S. Navy vet with over 20 years experience in training, in instructional design, and in enablement. He is an expert on measuring the impact of sales programs and scaling organizations, and he has a deep understanding of sales processes, methodologies, and best practices. When he is not getting reps ready to crush their quotas, he loves working out, cooking, traveling, movies, and spending time with his family. Jake, we're super excited to have you here today. Over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate that. Welcome, everyone, to the 5 metrics to baseline sales for enablement. Before I do an intro or expand on Michelle's intro, I wanted to give you my why. So when the Enablement Squad reached out to me and asked me if I wanted to present, I was pretty excited, and I had several different topics, but I've been seeing a lot of chatter on LinkedIn about the effectiveness of enablement, and obviously it hits really close to home. And um, I wanted to do this topic because it's not just a nice to have, it is a must have now to tie our efforts to revenue output. So I don't want to see enablement go away. I do want to see it evolve, and hopefully this can help us all level up our game a little bit and tie our efforts to revenue output, and hopefully get us a seat at the table and speak more confidently about metrics. So a little bit about myself while I'm going through this. If you'd like to get your phone out, scan the QR code, and connect, more than happy to connect. And always love helping enablers. So if you have any questions, you can always feel free to shoot me a message. Like Michelle mentioned, I got my start in the U.S. Navy when I was voluntold to work with my division and department to do training on ops and intel. Fell in love with all the different strategies and those light bulbs going off for everyone. Decided to pursue a degree in teaching, and then found myself in instructional design. Did sales for a little bit, but eventually found my way into enablement. I live in Northern Illinois with my wife and daughter. If anybody absolutely loves where they live, I'm looking for recommendations. It was 4 degrees this morning when I dropped my daughter off at the bus, which is far too cold. So I would like to move. I love staying healthy. I'm a total nerd at heart. Love learning anything and everything. And anybody that knows me, my motto is make it happen. I'm always up for a challenge. So today's objectives, hopefully after this, we'll be able to collaborate with sales ops a little bit better, be able to forecast a good or bad quarter weeks in advance. I know that's not typically a responsibility of enablement, but if we can make ourselves part of that, I think that would be even better. And also transform your enablement efforts to be more data driven. So a call out to Stephanie. She has this really awesome enablement maturity model, which SalesHood also has one. So I recommend taking a look at those. I think they're absolutely fantastic. So I want to jump into these metrics fairly quickly. But beforehand, just some quick ground rules. If you have anything to share, a resource, or you like to connect with other people, feel free to put your URL in the chat, which Michelle is monitoring. So if you have a question, Hopefully, when I take a breath, she'll be able to interject. But you know, also, if you have a disagreement, I'm a firm believer that the opposite of what I think may also be correct. So please feel free to provide a different point of view. Always love that. I'd like to start this off with how closely do you collaborate with your sales ops team? Sorry if you're not a fan of peanut butter and jelly, but that means you're extremely close. You do have a one-on-one. It could be better. A weekly vent session, or you're just not sure who it is. And I say sales ops, I include rev ops in that. Also, if you are sales ops or something other than enablement, feel free to put that in chat as well. I just have to click back and forth so I can see the different messages
It's
here.
all good. I can let you know. Actually, I'm very really excited to say a lot of A's are coming in.
Nice.
A
That
lot
is
of A's are coming
fantastic.
in.
Beautiful. I see that.
Okay, we got one monthly, we have a weekly. Okay, all right, we're starting to get, yep, okay, here come the bees. Here come the bees.
Yeah, I
All
love
right,
it.
that's still pretty good though, right? A's and B's, not too bad.
Absolutely.
Nope. Used to be A and now we're C due to org alignment. Uh-oh.
And that happens. I've been all over this, by the way. So there are some obviously some answers that are better than others, but there's no wrong answer. So, you know, this is a space for learning. So hopefully if yeah, sales ops, somebody's leaving, unfortunately. But hopefully this is a way that enablement can better prove their worth and their value to the company. It's nice to have your cheerleader at the top that's shouting for enablement and the great things that we can do. Um, but you know, if we've learned something recently with large SaaS companies, nobody's coming to save you. So you have to prove that you have that value yourself and you can tie your efforts directly to the company's vision and have that strategy and prove what you're doing is effective and that you're moving the needle. Awesome. So um, I want to have a quick word about KPIs. So, this presentation is not about KPIs. So, KPIs obviously measure performance. And if anybody had caught Peter Ostrow's presentation not that long ago, absolutely fantastic on how we can measure our effectiveness. I recommend trying to look that up and watch that. What I'm talking about comes before KPIs, so more baselining and setting your own benchmarks. There are industry benchmarks that I'll briefly mention, but measurement shouldn't be arbitrary. You should actually know what you're shooting for and then reevaluate that periodically. And anytime there's a change in positioning or the market, reevaluate that, but you should always know what your baseline is. So the five metrics that I'll be discussing are not an indication of performance, they're for baseline. Another quick poll that I do want to ask is what metrics you're currently tracking. So are they those metrics that enablement may have direct or indirect with, or are they really high level stuff, both, or nothing at all? Which, if you're tribal and just starting out, that's what it'll be. So you might be tribal or completely reactive, which often happens. I've been there before with startups, but that's also a great place to be. So A and C. Okay, great. Some B's, some high level stuff. Awesome. Ideally, because enablement is a mixture of strategy and being tactical, you know, in my opinion, that's where I always try to sit. Um, but it depends on the needs of the business. And if you can tie your value back and show that you're moving the needle, even better. Okay. Awesome. Thank you. I'll have a few other questions that I'll throw in there. Might not be a specific slide, but I'll ask for feedback to see what everybody's understanding is throughout the presentation. So I do want to stress one more. I love this quote, but I do want to stress that you should be the one in the room with the data. Um, I've noticed, and this is just my observation, that companies really value sales ops, and you can see by some job descriptions that their salaries tend to be a bit higher, and I have some thoughts on why, because they have the data and they're able to interpret that data and turn that into knowledge and make recommendations. And they're in the room helping steer the ship. So if we can up level our game, like I mentioned before, that would just make us a bit more valuable and maybe put a little more cash in our pockets. So, um, another thing you'll see throughout, I'll be speaking about the sales funnel. If you're working on a sales flywheel, all the same, this is meant for pre-sales outbound. However, if you're post-sales or inbound, like I said, feel free to connect and we can discuss about that. There are so many similarities, so happy to discuss that another time. I've developed this acronym just to help you remember exactly what the metrics are, really easy. We're going to be talking about effectiveness on the phones and email, as well as closing acumen, qualification effectiveness, as well as discovery. So I know it sounds really simple, and it's simple on purpose because there are so many metrics that we can measure. Excuse me. So boiling it down to five will really give you an idea of what your pipeline should be looking like and some mitigations that enablement can do to help that along. So let's jump into the first metric. So the first three metrics will be volume metrics, and the last two will be conversion metrics. And peaked, my acronym, just like my pick, is a little out of order, but we will be going in order of the funnel. So top of funnel, we're looking at the average number of minutes needed to generate a live connect, which is anything over 30 seconds. So we're looking at phone requirements for the top of funnel. And does anybody want to take a guess on what the benchmark generally is for the average number of minutes to connect? So if you're thinking about how many calls your XDR makes, how long before somebody actually gets to speak to someone for at least 30 seconds. So you're thinking they're clicking call, it rings, listen to the short message, and then they leave a voicemail. And then they leave that voicemail, they hang up, maybe take some notes, and then click again. So yes, thank you, Michelle. Nate says 45 minutes, 14. Ooh, you would be on fire if it were 14 minutes. That would be fantastic. 95, 60. Yeah, we're all dancing around it. Surprisingly enough, the benchmark is between 45 to 60 minutes. So if you think about if that call generally lasts around 3 minutes, like I mentioned, from click to click, it might take an XDR around 3 minutes to connect and have that 30-second connect. So roughly every 20 calls, if it takes 3 minutes, is how it breaks down. So every 20 calls, you'll be able to speak to someone. So what can we do in enablement to make sure that sellers are on point, whether they're leaving a voicemail or speaking to somebody, is something I've done in the past is develop a script. And please, for the love of God, allow this to be personalized. You don't want someone to sound like a robot. You want to give them time to practice that, listen to that. Hopefully, their manager is listening and providing some coaching. Um, And you can also take a look at call recording analysis, whether you're using Gong or Chorus or um, Clear Copilot. Um, be mindful of their tone as well as their timing, and when they do get to speak to someone, how well they're versed in objection handling. That can help a lot. You'll see on the slides too, I have an anchor at the bottom. That's my anchor point to briefly mention some things. So these are just a couple of things that I've done in the past. There are so many other things that enablement can do to help. So I rarely ever, if ever, think I'm the smartest person in the room. So I would love if we could all learn from each other. If you have some other ideas on what enablement can do to help XDRs on the phone, please feel free to put that in chat. I would love that so we can all learn from each other. If you are just starting out and your outbound team doesn't quite have a sequence, I would recommend taking a look at the Agoji sequence. So this was developed by um, a BDR at Outreach. And like any good sequence, it is a mixture of phones and email as well as social media. And as we'll see in the next metric, sequences are quite long on purpose. So it's a place to start, and you can experiment with changing that up depending on the industry that you're selling into. So your sequences might be different, but the Agoji sequence is probably a good place to start. The next metric, again, this is a volume metric. So the average number of touches required to generate a live response. So if somebody calls back and they hang up, they don't leave a voicemail. So that doesn't count. So do you want to take a guess what the benchmark is for the average number of touches that it takes for a response? What would that be? 17, 14, 60, 20 to 30. More than reps things generally, yeah. 40. So there is a difference between commercial and enterprise. So if you're working with a high value account, it will be higher. So the benchmark for commercial is generally between 8 to 12. That's why sequences are so lengthy. If it's a high value account, the benchmark is 12 to 20. So again, something to think about as you're baselining and just see how you compare with other companies within your given industry. And things that we can think about within enablement that I've done is to develop an email template library with clear calls to action. And they should also be aligned to personas and the buyer journey as well. Um, so a quick word about industries is to just make sure that you're taking a look at not just the industry, but the segments within the industry. And I'll get to that in another metric. Industries might be a little high level depending on how you're going to market, but also follow-up strategies is something a lot of times we might not think about exactly how do you do that. It might not just be shooting off another email. It's there's a technique to that. Um, and also my anchor point to mention here is a subject line checker. So if anybody has a subject line checker that they absolutely love, I know we might want to take those with a grain of salt, but they do give us some ideas we might not have thought about. Shoot a link in the chat. I would love to see some different subject line checkers, maybe that some people um, trust. I know there are a lot of free ones out there. But I do want to mention there has been a growing list for the longest time of specific words that will get your domain blocked as spam. So you want to be mindful of those and make those available to sellers as well. Subject line checkers may not always catch that. The biggest one is free. So if you put free in the subject line, not a good idea. To get that unblocked is such a pain, especially if you're a startup. But I remember a long time ago. I won't tell you the date, but when I was in high school learning from my English teacher, he said, when you're writing, each paragraph should make the reader want to go to the next paragraph. Or as a professional, marketing would always tell me the most important thing is a subject line. It should make you want to open the email. And as you're writing, each line should make you want to go to the next line. So subject lines are extremely important. It takes some finesse and a bit of research, but there are a ton of subject line checkers out there. So if anyone has one that they would recommend, that would be fantastic. We're at the middle here. So the third metric, this is also a volume metric. So the number of discovery meetings to get a proof of concept or proof of value, we're talking about discovery effectiveness. Um, some things that we can do within enablement that I've done is develop questioning frameworks. I have seen at the beginning of the chat, people were mentioning qualification. So whether you're using PACT or BANT or MEDPIC, they all have similar things that you're trying to get to the bottom of, if it's pain or the different types of pain and how to measure that pain as well. And also persona and industry training. So this is where I want to speak briefly about industry training. Let's say your sellers are selling into insurance. Insurance is a segment of financial services. So if you were to do training on the industry, it might not be extremely relevant to the buyers that are within insurance, just like banking. So that makes up financial services. So you might want to, yes, do a trends and challenges of the industry, but then boil that down to the segment within that industry and then correlate that to your solutions that you're trying to offer, whether it's a product or a service. So some things that can really help with that, my anchor point here, I'm a big fan of AI and using that strategically. So any large language model of your choice is fantastic for doing research. Some are better than others. You do want to fact check, but just to do some quick research, you can type into any AI of your choice and ask what the challenges are that this company has faced in the previous 12 months. And it'll give you the answer. Unlike Google, you'll have to search through results. You'll get more of a direct answer with that. That paired with this tool Quarter, which I'm not affiliated with, but I think it's really slick. And mind the spelling, it's Quartr. So if you go to quarter.com, it's a little buried. So if you go to Discover and Companies, so Discover is in the nav menu at the top, and you go to Companies, if you're looking up a public company, it doesn't work with public sector, just public companies. And you know the parent company, for instance, Google is owned by Alphabet. So you type in Alphabet and you're going to look for either a 10K or 10Q, which you can download. And I don't know if you're a fan of reading those. I'm not. And I definitely don't want to necessarily teach sellers how to read them. I want to teach them how to use them to their advantage. You can actually take that and plug that into an AI tool. Just use the paperclip feature there, load it and give it a prompt like, given the attachment, what challenges has this company faced correlating to and insert your solution. So whether it's cybersecurity or workforce planning or whatever your solution is, and it will read it for you. Now, if you have the pro version of Quarter, they have AI built in that can do that for you. But if you don't have a budget and you're relying on free tools, that's a pretty slick way to do research with free tools. So definitely take a look at that. Does anybody want to take a guess on the number of discovery meetings needed to generally get a proof of concept? What do you think? And it could be small to mid business or enterprise as well. Where's a good guess? 3, type of ratio are we aiming for? Yeah, Mark, we're aiming for, that's a good question. So it really depends on the industry you're selling into. Um, Hopefully the ratio is pretty low. So if it is small to mid business, 1 to 2 discovery meetings will generally suffice. I've seen some sellers combine a demo with their discovery call just to save some time. And some sales processes actually break that out. So that's the art part of selling. So if a seller feels really comfortable combining those and can do that, um, that is fantastic. Um, Now I would probably say enterprise is going to be higher. It might be 2 to 4 meetings. And a word about that. So if you think about selling into enterprise and I know, demos. If you join a call, and here's something that sellers like to brag about, that they're going to have this super long call with all these decision makers on the call, and the first thing I think about is, okay, how many people's minds would I prefer to change? So if I'm working enterprise, I would rather talk to 1 or 2 people and change their mind rather than get every decision maker on the call and change 5 people's minds. So I would actually prefer to break it up. And there are more discovery calls for enterprise too, because generally, all decision makers can't get on the call. But that's the difference between commercial sales and enterprise sales. So commercial sellers will navigate east and west, or sorry, backwards. Commercial sellers will navigate north and south, and they'll get a champion and go for the economic buyer, which is great. But enterprise sellers will navigate east and west and get multiple champions and multiple economic buyers. And that's why it takes so much longer, and the payout is so much more. The deal is going to be bigger. You're going to be stickier. But I would definitely prefer to have multiple discovery meetings and work with each champion one-on-one or two-on-one. But fewer numbers for me is a bit less intimidating and a little easier to change minds if there's a smaller group. Awesome. So yeah, if you do check out that tool, let me know if you have any other neat tricks up your sleeve. I'd love to know those as well. All right, second to last one, we're getting into conversion metrics now. So the number of discovery meetings to closed won deals. So we're looking at qualification effectiveness. We're on the queue of peaked. So some things that I've helped sellers with in the past are stakeholder mapping tools. So these are especially helpful, just like um, mutual action plans, but stakeholder mapping tools are really helpful the more complex the sale is. And urgency creation tactics. So if you think about um, assessing whether you have an actual buyer, if they're responding fairly quickly, there might not be a need to create a whole lot of urgency. If they're responding in time, especially if they're switching from email to text for your seller, beautiful. If they're trying to reach out. Now, if they're a little slow to respond, there are some things that we can do and communicate to sellers some things to try, whether it's if they're jumping on the call with their prospect and they want to ask about any missed objectives that they had from the last quarter, or if they actually counterintuitive, but if they want to get a little scarce, that makes their time much more of a commodity. So if they don't respond right away to emails, if they just kind of hold back a little bit and then respond, something like that. But also something is competitive pressure. And I don't mean your own as a seller, but to go into the conversation with your opportunity and know their competition. So for instance, if you're speaking to Nike and within the industry there are certain trends and challenges and you do a little research on Under Armour, then you can talk to Nike and say, This is what another competitor in your space has done, even better if they're your customer, but you can provide that value before they even buy anything. But you can be an advisor, or the seller can be the advisor to that potential customer and apply that competitive pressure to create that urgency. I read a great thing on LinkedIn this morning also about just trying to move up meetings when sellers send out their calendar link. Of course, a lot of people want to take what's convenient, but there are tools out there to assess whether something can be moved up or not or rescheduled. And they were able to leverage this tool to move up meetings and shorten their sales cycle by 20%, which is outstanding. So my anchor point is, um, yes, sellers obviously need to know competitive intel, but they need to know their prospects, competition as well. Our last one, bottom of the funnel, or last in the flywheel in pre-sales, is also a conversion metric. The number of proposals sent to redline contracts. So we're looking at closing acumen. So this is so important. Um, get my notes here. So one thing that I have done is a closing toolkit, and it's just to provide sellers with some clear and transparent questions. This is an awful time to figure out if you actually have your champion or not. If they give you answers like we'll have to get back to you or things like that. But have those questions that get it straight out in front of them. So if there is a need for another meeting, I know a lot of sellers like to work over email and keep things loose sometimes, but I'm a big fan of another acronym called BAMFAM, which stands for Book a Meeting from a Meeting. Um, and that goes back to discovery and trying to book a demo. If you don't have it on one call, I would definitely book that meeting for a demo or another follow-up discovery while you're on the call with that potential customer. Um, of course, customer stories are so valuable. Even better if they're within the same industry. But if you think about it, what those customer stories are trying to do is convey value. Um, but with the state of the current economy, if you think about it, if you're surrounded by vendors and they're all trying to sell you something and they're all speaking about value, what would you do? Personally, I would probably try to prioritize them. And they say the answer to 9 out of 10 questions is either time or money. However, um, that's one variable or two variables. But what I would try to do is build that business case and understand what all the challenges are that they're trying to solve. And value is a standard to talk about. However, discussing the priority might elevate the conversation a little bit, and a seller can help that potential customer understand what the priority is a little bit better. In lean terms, if you solve one problem and later you have to solve it again, it's rework, which is a waste. So you wouldn't want your customer to do that. You would want to point out, if you go with our solution first, this is the order that things are going to play out, and just help them maybe see some things that they hadn't considered. Um, my anchor point is time is an absolute deal killer. So the sooner you can move things along and talk about priority, the better. And last one, in terms of benchmarks, does anybody want to take a guess? The number of or percentage of proposals to redline contracts returned. What do you think? Whether it's small to mid business or enterprise. Loving the discussion. That's fantastic. 35%. Yeah, Nate, for enterprise, yep, that's spot on between 30 and 50%. Absolutely. For small to mid business, 60 to 80%. If you're noticing that get a little out of control, you might want to take a look at their closing acumen or their competitive positioning. Absolutely. So love it. So before we jump into Q&A, I actually want to ask Michelle to put up a link to a survey. I know sometimes people like to jump off before Q&A, but if everyone can click that and just keep that open in a tab, and complete that at some point throughout the day. A little bit of feedback for myself as well as the Enablement Squad. A couple questions in there. So if you just keep that open in a tab, you don't have to do it, excuse me, right now, but would certainly be helpful. And then with that, I'd like to open it up for Q&A. And like I said, I may not be the smartest person in the room. We have a lot of fantastic minds on the call today. So if anybody wants to come off mute and answer a question as well, by all means, I would absolutely love it. Thanks, Michelle. So that's the link to the survey. Really quick. All the questions are not mandatory, so it should only take you a minute or two. Super simple.
Jake, in your experience, how often are you reviewing these metrics with sales leaders like CROs or even your partners over in revenue operations?
All the time, as often as possible. I referred to lean previously. I'm just always a big fan and know how that correlates to so many other things, regardless of industry. So the more often that you can evaluate metrics, um, sometimes you obviously do want to take a step back and see the trajectory and what's going on as well as historical data. Um, there is a seasonality to selling. Some months just naturally have dips. So to be able to get that historical knowledge is fantastic as well. But just to be able to dig in and speak with different customers and get different points of view. So data only tells half the story. So we don't want to forget the qualitative part of data as well. So digging into that and just staying close to ops and your sellers is best.
Yeah, and like you just mentioned, data is only a certain percentage of the story because there are outliers. There may be external factors that happened in a given week, month, period, what have you. So it's always important. Yeah, maybe your win rates dipped by 20%. However, that could have been due to external factors, not necessarily enablement efforts and skill gaps on your team. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. I agree.
Nate, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Jake, first of all, loved it. Thank you. I have 3 pages.
Hey.
Perfect. So going back to your second slide or third slide, you said the KPI note on there as well. At the end of the day, businesses want to see revenue growth. Businesses want to see larger deal sizes. So as an enablement professional, what's your recommendation or approach to, yes, the business sees those are important. It's absolutely the lifeblood of a company. Here's what we own, here's what we don't own. Maybe you could take us through an example of a conversation you have with leaders that want to see that, even if we can't really deliver that as a measure or outcome.
A discussion around increasing deal size.
Yeah, you put that slide of like, it makes us seem important when we talk about revenue close but there are so many other factors that are focused on that too. So I guess how do you overcome that when you're working with the CRO and the CRO says, yeah, but I expect everybody to improve their quota attainment or hit more revenue. How do you respond to that or manage that accordingly to get them to see your peaked perspective?
That's an excellent question. I've been part of that discussion before. So um, first and foremost, I would say do not try to answer that on your own. So enablement, everybody expects us to have a magic wand or just add another plate or something like that. Enablement's an ecosystem. So you should most certainly be working with obviously sales or revenue ops, your sales leaders, marketing and product, and get different buy-in and see how you can collectively answer that. So increasing deal size, one of the easiest ways that may or may not be appropriate for a company is including differentiators that other companies might not have, whether it's training or white glove service and post sales from your customer success team or your account managers. And you might want to put things in place where those factors are included automatically, and there may need to be an approval process for people to get that removed. But when you go to implement your service and you want to make sure they do it the right way, otherwise the wrong way will cost more money. So something very complex like implementing cybersecurity policies, and there's a lot of compliance. You do want to make sure you're running health checks and you guide them along the way. But that generally won't be free. As far as training being free, that's a discussion for another time. I know there's a whole values point of view in that and a lot of things with that, but including training is something to differentiate that. And then, there are also methodologies like command of the meshes that will say charge more. And there's a perception with that as well. But yeah, I would not try to answer that my own. I would try to get as much information as possible and how enablement can help with that, and then include certain things like that to raise the TCV.
Yeah, that's great, Jake. Thank you.
How about you? You would probably have some sort of expectation or thoughts on that too. How would you do that, Nate?
Yeah, put it back on me, huh? No, I'm asking the
I
question.
mean, I'm
No, no,
curious too, because I have some experiences, but I haven't been doing this 50 years. I'm curious
no, the gray
as
hair
well
makes
as
me think
other
I've been doing this for 50 years. Oh my God, I got to just for men here. Next purchase online.
Yeah.
No, the cynic, and some of you have heard me say this before. As enablers, we can often take more credit than none and less credit than all, right?
Mhm.
In terms of the success or growth of a business. Um, I think it's really helpful to have that conversation. I agree. Don't do it alone. There's a lot of other people that are looking at it, but if they say revenue growth is how we're going to measure enablement success, I think it's applying actually some of these, doing good discovery and, working backwards of like, okay, well, what goes into revenue? What are numbers that you think we can actually come closer to owning, and having that conversation with the person that's asking for outcome? Ultimately, kind of getting them to agree that, like, yes, there are more factors in play than like training works. We hit quota. Training doesn't work because we didn't hit quota. Um, Questions is super important. Helping our stakeholders and internal partners understand that is really important. But it is sometimes people who are not in this space do have unrealistic expectations, and it can be helpful to massage those conversations, or work them back from, yeah, that'd be amazing if we could do that. Realistically, here are the factors that we can directly control. Here are the things we can directly influence.
Yeah, I love that. Expectations are like opinions, and you know what they say about opinions. So that's why it's really important to have the data. And if somebody has this expectation, I would love to see, what the data is behind that. I've had unrealistic quotas before, and I'm like, well, can I see what other sellers in this territory have performed before? Where are you getting that expectation? Do we have the same market fit? And are you setting me up for success, or just setting me up? So yeah, absolutely. And Kelsey, thank you for putting your link in there. Looks like you have some amazing qualifications. So yeah, if anybody can help out Kelsey, that would be fantastic.
I think final questions for Jake. Okay, just a comment in the chat. These baseline metrics are a way to establish where the team is now, where is there opportunity to improve, and to build a strong base to build upon. Once you know what the standard is, yep, then you can start to measure impact.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely spot on. Like I said, you don't want your KPIs to be arbitrary. You want to be able to prove that, yeah, you do want to smash glass ceilings. Everybody does. Everybody wants to make more money. We're all coin operated, or at least I am, but sellers are too. but they have to be rooted in something empirical, and you have to take a moment to do your research within the industry that you're in, if you're in a niche, or you just have some massive competition, but you do want to be realistic about those. And thank you, Nina. I appreciate that. I really enjoyed presenting.
Absolutely. Well, Jake, it's been a pleasure to have you on the webinar. For those of you who are still here, please make sure to fill out the survey that was posted in the chat. If anyone is interested in guesting on the Enablement Squad webinar, please reach out to us. We would love to have you. Jake, thank you again so much. And looking forward to the next one. Take care, everybody.
Likewise. Thank you.
Thank
Take care.
you.